You're tired, but your mind won't stop turning. Questions, memories, thoughts you didn't invite, they all come knocking when the world goes quiet. That's why I made this story, for nights like this, to give your mind something soft to hold, a slow unraveling of mystery and history, to carry you gently into sleep. Welcome, my sleepless historian. You found your way to Anastasia's whisper. Tonight, we slip past locked doors and velvet curtains into one of the most secret places in the world, the Vatican archives. But this time, we aren't looking for papal decrees or royal letters. We're searching for something older, stranger, traces of Egyptian magic, spells, rituals, sacred scrolls, sealed away by centuries of silence. So lie back, close your eyes, and let the hush of history tuck you in. This is the Vatican's hidden files, mysteries of Egyptian magic uncovered, and sleep is just a whisper away. It begins behind a door most people never notice. Set into the ancient stonework of Vatican City, past the shimmer of golden mosaics and the quiet hush of marble chapels, there lies a hallway, dimly lit, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps that came quietly and often alone. At the end of that hallway, there's a bronze door. Does not bear a name, no plaque, no emblem, no keyhole, just presence, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Few are ever allowed past it, because what lies beyond is not just a room, it's an entire hidden world, a fortress of memory sealed in parchment, ink, and time. This is the Vatican Apostolic Archive, formerly known and more famously whispered about as the Vatican Secret Archive. Over 50 miles of shelving stretch through its corridors. Let that settle in for a moment. 50 miles. All filled with handwritten documents, scrolls, folios, and sealed letters, some dating back more than 12 centuries. Others, even older, written by unknown hands and forgotten tongues, stored in rooms few humans have stepped inside. You cannot simply enter the archive. There is no grand tour. You must apply, request, wait. And if you are approved, as only a few dozen scholars are each year, you may read exactly what you've asked for, and nothing more. No browsing, no wandering, no searching for what you do not already know exists. A paradox, isn't it? How do you ask for a document if no one is even certain it's there? But that is the mystery. That is the pull. Because somewhere, buried among the royal decrees, the medieval ledgers, and the carefully preserved papal bulls, there are rumors, soft ones, quiet ones, but persistent. They speak of knowledge far older than Christianity, of scrolls wrapped not in Latin bindings, but in Egyptian linen, of magical texts, of rituals and incantations, of ancient beliefs not destroyed, but stored, hidden. The Church has always had a complex relationship with forbidden knowledge. It has burned books, yes, but also quietly saved them, copied them, studied them, and locked them away in vaults so deep, so protected that the line between preservation and suppression becomes blurred. Because history, unlike myth, is not orderly. It flows like water, changing shape, slipping into crevices, carried from one empire to another on the backs of merchants, pilgrims, and conquerors. And some of it made its way to Rome. Not the Rome of Caesar, but the Rome of popes. Imagine for a moment a priest in the year 800, unrolling a papyrus written in a language he doesn't fully understand, symbols of snakes and ankhs, spells invoking gods he's never heard spoken aloud. Does he destroy it, translate it, or lock it away and add it to a growing shelf of texts too strange to explain, too sacred to touch? And then, over centuries, those shelves multiply. New scrolls arrive. Some are copied by hand, others are simply catalogued and left to rest in the cool, dry darkness. Forgotten, but never gone. What exactly is in those vaults? We may never know. Even the few allowed inside can only scratch the surface, and even then, only with gloves, supervision, and silence. Yet the rumors persist, because every now and then something escapes. A letter, a reference, a scholar's private note mentioning a papyrus, faintly inked with hieroglyphs, describing healing rituals and divine chants from a land long buried beneath the desert sun. It's just enough to stir the imagination, just enough to make us wonder. What did the early church know about Egyptian magic? Why was it kept? And what truths still linger in those scrolls, waiting patiently to be seen again? We may never have all the answers, but we can follow the trail, a soft one, a sleepy one. And tonight, we begin that journey, not in Rome, but far to the east, where the Nile once flowed beside temples, and magic wasn't fiction but faith. A land where the spoken word could heal the sick, protect the living, and guide the dead to peace. A land that the Vatican may still remember, even if only in whispers. What if the oldest magical texts in the world, not myths but real spells, rituals, incantations, never disappeared at all? What if they were simply moved, lifted from the sands of the Nile and carried, ever so quietly, into the very heart of the Church? To understand why the Vatican might hide Egyptian magic, you must first understand what Egyptian magic was. Because this wasn't hocus pocus. This wasn't fantasy. In ancient Egypt, magic was law. It was medicine. It was the software running the entire civilization. And it worked. Not because they believed blindly, but because they believed precisely. So where did this magic come from? Who used it? And how, centuries later, could fragments of it end up hidden in papal archives, locked away behind bronze doors in a city that once tried to silence it? We'll get there. But first, we return to the river. Imagine the banks of the Nile at dawn, mist curling around the reeds, the cry of a water bird somewhere in the distance, and in a small stone temple, a priest steps barefoot into a courtyard. He bows to the rising sun, raises his hands to the east, and begins to chant, not from memory, but from a rhythm passed down for generations. He's not performing a show. He's performing reality. To the ancient Egyptians, the force behind all creation was called Heka, a divine energy that shaped the world, not once, but every single day. Even the gods required Heka to function. It wasn't optional. It was cosmic infrastructure, and humans too had access to it, not as an accident, but as a sacred duty. So magic in Egypt wasn't a side practice, it was the practice. Temples weren't just houses of prayer. They were laboratories of sound, of vibration, of breath. Priests spent decades learning not just what to say, but how to say it, the precise tone, the sacred silence between syllables, because to speak a spell was to create or destroy. Even daily life was soaked in ritual. A mother might tie an amulet of turquoise around her child's wrist to protect against scorpions. A farmer might spit into the earth and whisper to the god of rain. A midwife might sing to Isis during childbirth, and carry a scroll inked in red, the sacred color of power, to place beneath the birthing stool. And what about the dead? They too needed magic, perhaps more than the living. When a person died, their soul would travel a perilous journey through the afterlife. Spells were needed, hundreds of them, to navigate the desert of the dead, to pass gates, tame demons, answer riddles, all to stand before the goddess Ma'at and have their heart weighed against a feather. If the heart was too heavy, it was fed to the devourer, and the soul vanished forever. But if the spells were right, if the words were remembered, the soul would pass and join the stars. These spells were written in books, scrolls, really. We now call the Book of the Dead, but in ancient times it was called the Book of Going Forth by Day. And it wasn't the only one. There were countless magical texts in Egypt, some public, some so secret they were written in codes only the priesthood could understand. And then came the visitors. The Greeks arrived, and they were fascinated. They studied Egypt's rituals. They mapped its temples. They merged their gods with Egyptian ones, Hermes with Thoth, Isis with Demeter. And they took the magic with them, adapted it, copied it. Then came the Romans and the early Christians. Some of them rejected the old ways, but others didn't. They saw something in those scrolls, a structure, a wisdom, a precision that they couldn't ignore. And so bit by bit, the ancient magic wasn't erased. It was rewritten, layered into prayers, folded into holy rites. Sometimes the gods' names changed. Sometimes they didn't. But the structure remained. We know this now because Coptic Christian texts in Egypt, written hundreds of years later, contain fragments of the very same Egyptian spells, wrapped gently in Christian language. A healing chant to Horus becomes a hymn to Christ. A fertility ritual for Isis becomes a blessing for Mary. Faiths changed, but the rhythm stayed. And somewhere in that long echo, some of those scrolls kept traveling across deserts, across oceans, into monasteries, into libraries. And if even one of them found its way to Rome, to be translated, cataloged, sealed away, then it may still be there now, sitting quietly on a shelf, waiting for a scholar who knows just the right name to ask for. Because in the Vatican archive, you cannot browse. You must know what you're looking for. And Egyptian magic, it was always good at hiding. You might wonder, how could a papyrus scroll survive that long? From the temples of Egypt, through invasions, translations, crusades, and fire, all the way to the quiet vaults beneath Vatican City? The answer is both unlikely and quietly miraculous, because some knowledge travels. The end of ancient Egypt wasn't sudden. It didn't collapse overnight. It faded, shifted, transformed. Temples were closed, statues buried, priests lost their roles. But not all the scrolls were burned. Some were taken. During the rise of the Greeks, than the Romans, Egypt's sacred knowledge was seen as exotic, powerful, even useful. Priests were questioned, texts were copied, magicians and scholars began compiling Egyptian spells into new languages, first Greek, then Latin, and eventually even into Coptic. The meaning changed, but the intention remained. And as Christianity spread, Egypt's old magic didn't vanish. It adapted. The early desert monks of Egypt, the very first Christian hermits settled near the ruins of old temples, they copied old texts. They collected charms and healing invocations. But they gave them new names. Where once they called on Thoth or Sekhmet, they now whispered prayers to Christ or to the Virgin Mary. They weren't trying to deceive anyone. They were preserving what they could in a language their world could accept. Some of these Christianized magic texts still survive, hidden in the bindings of old manuscripts, folded into monastic libraries, found in tombs and monasteries along the Nile, like faint breaths from a vanished time. Others disappeared entirely, or were taken by merchants, by soldiers, and by the church. Because even as the church condemned sorcery, it also collected knowledge, painfully, secretly, silently. Imagine a scroll rescued from a collapsing Egyptian library, written in Demotic, the everyday script of the late Egyptians. It's fragile, but readable. Inside, spells to protect a newborn, or to speak with the divine, or to guide the soul through a dangerous dream. Now imagine that scroll being carried on a ship across the Mediterranean, to Athens, then to Constantinople, then to Rome. And when it arrives, a scholar, curious, cautious, begins to translate it, not to use it, but to understand it. What did these people believe? How did they think? What power did they think their words held? And quietly, without fanfare, that scroll is stored, filed, preserved, forgotten. We know the church did this, not just with Egyptian texts, but with documents from every corner of the ancient world. Hebrew scrolls, Persian writings, Greek gospels that never made it into the Bible. They were kept not because they were true, but because they were dangerous, because they held something that couldn't be destroyed without first being understood. And so the archive grew. By the Middle Ages, the church had become one of the largest holders of ancient texts in Europe. Monasteries were the libraries of the world, and the Vatican was the final vault. Documents arrived from Spain, from Syria, from Egypt. Some were copied, some were hidden, some were never mentioned again. And then there's the curious case of the Greek magical papyri, a real collection discovered in modern times. Written between the 2nd century BCE and the 5th century CE, they contain spells for nearly everything: love, wealth, protection, dream interpretation. They reference Egyptian gods, Greek gods, Christian figures, sometimes all in the same paragraph. They're a swirl of spiritual traditions and a map of how ancient people saw the world. Some scholars believe the originals were copied from older Egyptian texts. But where are those originals? Some say they were destroyed. Others believe they were taken in the early days of the church. And maybe, just maybe, some of them rest on the shelves of the Vatican archive, cataloged under a name no one's thought to search. Because here's the secret. You can't enter the archive and browse. You must request a document by name, so unless someone knows exactly what to look for, a scroll of Egyptian magic could sit there for centuries, untouched, a treasure, invisible. And we're not just imagining this. In 2012, a scholar uncovered a Vatican manuscript containing an exorcism spell, written in Coptic, adapted from an earlier Egyptian rite. It wasn't listed under magic. It was buried in a theological collection, mislabeled. It had been there for 1,200 years. How many others are like it? So tonight, as you drift gently into sleep, imagine that scroll, yellowed, silent, waiting, the ink still dark, the symbols still sharp. It whispers of gods and spirits, of protection and healing. It carries the breath of a scribe long gone and a prayer meant for the world of the living. And it rests beneath Rome, not destroyed, not celebrated, just hidden, waiting for the right eyes and the right question. Next, we step into the legend of Hermes Trismegistus, a figure who bridges Egyptian wisdom and Christian mystery, a name written in Greek, but born in the temples of Egypt. Was he a god, a man, or just the mask that hid ancient truth? Let's find out. Before the Vatican held secrets, before the church sealed vaults and silenced scrolls, there was a name whispered across the ancient world: Thoth, scribe of the gods, master of language, guardian of the moon, of time, of balance. In the temples of Egypt, he was honored as the divine mind, the one who gave humanity the gift of writing and the wisdom to use it well. It was said that Thoth had written 42 sacred books, hidden deep within a temple, sealed with magic and protected by curses. Inside those books, everything, the secrets of the stars, the blueprint of the soul, the words that created the world. Some say they were only myth. Others are not so sure. Because long after the last Egyptian pharaoh had vanished, the name of Thoth did not fade. It simply changed. Enter Hermes Trismegistus, a mysterious figure born of fusion, Greek, Egyptian, maybe divine. Trismegistus means thrice great, a reference perhaps to his mastery of alchemy, astrology, and theology. He was said to be a philosopher, a prophet, a magician, and maybe Thoth himself in disguise. The writings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus began appearing in the early centuries of the Common Era, texts that spoke in riddles, visions, dreams. They called them the Hermetica, books with titles like the Divine Pymander, the Asclepius, and the Emerald Tablet, a short poetic fragment that would go on to shape Western alchemy for centuries. Its most famous line, "As above, so below. What is within is also without." The macrocosm reflected in the microcosm, a single phrase that launched 1,000 theories, 100 philosophies, and more than a few secret societies. To many in medieval Europe, the Hermetic texts were sacred, a key to hidden wisdom, preserved before the flood, older than Moses, older even than time. To the early church, they were suspicious, too pagan, too powerful, and yet too eloquent to ignore. Some church scholars believed Hermes had glimpsed the divine, not through heresy, but through natural reason. They thought perhaps he had discovered truths that aligned in their own mysterious way with Christian revelation. This is where the story takes a curious turn, because rather than destroying the Hermetica, some monks copied them, translated them, studied them, and in the Renaissance, they returned in full force. A Florentine scholar named Marsilio Ficino was commissioned to translate the Hermetic texts into Latin. He believed them to be more ancient than the Bible itself. The result? A wildfire of interest across Europe. Philosophers, alchemists, physicians, they all studied the texts, not for superstition, but for insight. They believed that hidden within those mystical phrases were the blueprints of the human soul and the recipe for transformation. And what does this have to do with the Vatican? Everything. Because many of those translated manuscripts found their way into libraries, into churches, and yes, into the archive, filed under Philosophia Hermetica, or sometimes simply marked heretical, preserve. They were not destroyed, they were watched, and alongside them sat other scrolls, older, stranger, written not in Greek, but in Egyptian, because even the Hermetica contains echoes, rituals, symbols, divine geometry that scholars now trace back to the temple rites of Egypt. In fact, in the Asclepius, one of the most famous Hermetic texts, Hermes speaks of Egyptian priests guarding a divine secret, a sacred knowledge passed down in silence. Sound familiar? And it doesn't stop there. Many early Christian saints and mystics were deeply influenced by these teachings, some directly, others through the layers of adaptation. Saint Augustine, for example, warned of Hermes Trismegistus, but also quoted him with curiosity. Medieval alchemists like Albertus Magnus and Roger Bacon hid Hermetic ideas beneath Christian symbolism, believing the two could coexist if handled with care. And some believe even the architecture of cathedrals echoes Hermetic geometry. So what began in Egypt as chants in moonlit temples, as spells written in red and black on folded papyrus, did not vanish. It migrated, wrapped in Greek, translated into Latin, blended with Christianity, and filed away, sometimes as sacred, sometimes as dangerous, but always preserved. Somewhere in the archive, beneath the watchful eye of angels carved in stone, may rest a document, unnamed, unrequested, untouched, carrying within it the echo of Thoth and the quiet hum of magic, still alive beneath the dust. Next, we turn to the most curious story of all, a document whispered about among scholars, never publicly revealed, but believed to exist. A papyrus, written in Demotic script, containing rituals of healing, protection, and resurrection. That was allegedly copied, hidden, and protected by the Church as a text too powerful for ordinary eyes. Let's follow that whisper into the silence of a sealed box. There are rumors, even in a place built on silence. In the long corridors of Vatican scholarship, whispers sometimes slip through the cracks, not from tourists or tabloids, but from the margins of footnotes, the pauses in conversations between archivists, the unnamed lines in old index cards. One of those whispers speaks of a manuscript, a single delicate papyrus, folded, faint, and utterly unlike anything else in the archive. The story is hard to verify. No one will say who saw it first or when. But here is how the whisper goes. In the early 20th century, a visiting scholar, a linguist fluent in Coptic, Greek, and Demotic Egyptian, was granted access to a restricted section of the archive. He had requested a list of unclassified papyri, those still uncatalogued or deemed non-theological. What he found was something else entirely. A fragment about the size of a hand, frail, dust-colored, its ink faded but legible. It was written in Demotic, a flowing cursive script used in the later periods of Egyptian history, rare, difficult, used for legal texts, letters, and magic. This fragment, he claimed, contained portions of a healing ritual, but not just herbs and blessings. It spoke of resurrection, of calling the soul back to the body, of reversing death, if done before the third moonrise. It included the names of old Egyptian gods, Isis, Anubis, Thoth, and beside them, a few Christian names, Christ, the Virgin, even the Archangel Raphael. It was a blend unlike anything he'd ever seen, the kind of text that doesn't belong to a religion. It belongs to a transition, a bridge, a fusion, a moment in time when belief systems bled into each other, not to conquer, but to preserve what they could. The scholar made a note, then requested permission to photograph the fragment. Permission was denied. The next day, the papyrus was gone, returned to its box, or moved. No one would say. Years later, in a private letter, never published, he referred to it simply as the resurrection sheet, and wrote. Its tone was not mythic. It was instructional, a manual to be used, not read. It frightened me. Now, that's all we know. No public record, no digital archive, no scanned image, only the whisper passed between those who study the shadows of sacred text. But it raises the question, why would the church keep such a thing? Why preserve it? Why not burn it? Unless they feared it or respected it, or didn't know how to explain it, and so filed it away quietly, where only the curious might stumble near. This isn't the only case. There are other documents scattered in university libraries, sealed in monastery boxes that contain similar language, Christianized versions of Egyptian spells, protection rituals reworded into saintly blessings, dream instructions written as visions from angels. Some even contain diagrams, circles, stars, names of power arranged in sacred geometry. Not theology, not sorcery. Something in between. Something that doesn't fit anywhere. So perhaps this resurrection sheet, if it does exist, is not an accident. Perhaps it was placed in the archive intentionally, as a puzzle, as a warning, or as a test to see who would find it and what they would believe. But here's the softest truth of all: the fact that it was copied, the fact that someone at some point believed in it enough to write it by hand, carefully, ritually, in sacred script, means that it mattered. To someone, it mattered. And even now, sitting in the hush of deep storage, wrapped in linen or behind glass, it may still carry a pulse, not of magic, not of religion, but of memory. Next, we drift forward in time to the modern Vatican, where digital scans, academic restrictions, and quiet politics still protect certain shelves. We'll explore how Egyptian magic lives on today, in symbols, prayers, and whispered echoes you might not even notice, and how the oldest spells in the world still shape how we seek peace. Not all echoes are loud. Some come so softly. They pass beneath notice, woven into gestures, symbols, words we speak without question, like crossing oneself before prayer, or lighting a candle for the departed, or whispering protection over a child's crib at night. You may not know it, but these things have ancestors, and many of those ancestors were Egyptian. Let's begin with something simple: holy water. In Christian churches, it's placed at the entrance, a basin to touch, to bless, to purify. But in ancient Egypt, long before the first cathedral rose, every temple contained a sacred pool. Priests would bathe before entering ritual chambers. They believed water held divine resonance, not just for cleansing the body, but for clearing the spirit. It was called the water of life. The ritual was not symbolic, it was energetic, a tuning of the soul. Sound familiar? And what about incense? Frankincense, myrrh, resin burned in gold censers. You see it today in monasteries, in Easter processions, in the smoky sanctuaries of high mass. But incense was also Egyptian. They believed its smoke carried prayers upward, visible breath offered to invisible gods, each scent chosen for a specific purpose: cinnamon for joy, myrrh for mourning, kefai, a complex blend for deep meditation. A recipe, not unlike a psalm, and then there are prayers spoken over the sick. Today we see priests anointing with oil, placing hands on shoulders, whispering Latin or Greek phrases of comfort and healing. But the Egyptians were among the first to do this in recorded history. They used spoken spells, not to manipulate, but to restore harmony between body and soul. They believed illness was not just physical, but spiritual imbalance, a disruption of Ma'at, the order of the world. Their solution: spoken word, symbolic gesture, natural medicine, and faith. Even the Christian Eucharist has echoes. In Egyptian temple rituals, bread and wine were offered to the gods daily, then consumed by the priests, who believed they were taking in divine energy, not metaphor, not symbol. They believed the god lived in the offering, and by consuming it, they were united with the divine. It's not identical to Christian communion, but the resonance is there, a quiet echo, a familiar shape. Now let's look at sacred names. In Christianity, the names of Jesus, Mary, and certain saints are believed to carry protective power. They are spoken in blessings, invoked in distress, written into amulets and rosaries. In Egypt, too, names held power, but in an even deeper way. To know a god's true name was to touch their essence. To say it aloud in the right way could open doorways or close them. There are Egyptian spells that list dozens of names for a single deity, because speaking the right one could summon their attention or drive away a curse. This tradition, centuries later, appears in Christian exorcism rites, the calling of angels by name, the layering of titles, the careful pronunciation of sacred words. Coincidence? Perhaps. But echoes are rarely random. Even the structure of prayer, the rhythm, the repetition, the rising intensity, finds roots in Egyptian temple chants. Some rituals required exact cadence, lines spoken in threefold, a breath between phrases. The voice was not just a tool, it was the magic itself. And today, in Gregorian chant, in Orthodox liturgy, in the lilting phrases of ancient prayers, you can still hear it, the breath, the tone, the hush. So what does this mean? Did Christianity steal from Egypt? It means something older, that humans, across time and belief, have always sought to touch the invisible. And when they found something that worked, something that made the spirit quiet, or the body heal, or the dream soften, they held onto it, even if they gave it a new name. So when you cross yourself at the door, or light a candle at night, or speak a blessing over someone you love, you're participating in something ancient, something older than churches, older than books, maybe older than history itself, a ritual passed hand to hand, voice to voice, until even its origins forgot their names. And perhaps, in the quiet vaults of the Vatican, among the scrolls labeled magic and the ones labeled faith, someone noticed the echo too, and chose not to separate them. Next, we arrive at the hush of our closing chapter, a soft descent into dreams and symbols, because the true magic of Egypt was never about power. It was about balance and about how the soul returns to rest. Let's go there now. There was a time when sleep wasn't just rest. It was a ritual, a gateway, a meeting place between the human and the divine. The ancient Egyptians knew this. They practiced it. They honored it. And now, so do you. In Egypt, dreams were not idle. They were messages, visions, visitations from gods, ancestors, or truths the waking mind could not hear. There were temples built just for sleeping, quiet, sacred spaces called temples of incubation. You didn't go there to pray. You went to dream. You would enter at night. After ritual cleansing, you would lie on a stone bench or a mat of palm leaves. Priests would anoint your forehead with oil, sometimes scented with blue lotus, sometimes frankincense. They might speak softly, chanting a protective invocation, and then silence. You would fall asleep surrounded by candlelight and statues, and the weight of something much larger than yourself. It was said that in such temples the god would come, perhaps in your dream, perhaps in your body. You might hear a voice, see a figure, feel a warmth along your skin as if the god had placed their hand upon your chest and breathed healing into your lungs. And when you woke, you would tell the priests what you saw. They would translate it, prescribe herbs, speak of omens, guide your soul back into balance. Sleep was medicine, not just for the body, but for the self. The soul, they believed, could travel during rest to other worlds, to sacred rivers beneath the stars, to the hall of Ma'at, where the heart was weighed in dreams long before it would be weighed in death. And if your dream was peaceful, if the voice you heard was kind, that meant your spirit was in harmony. That meant you were well. What a beautiful idea. That sleep isn't an escape, it's a return, a conversation, a place where your inner world rises gently to the surface and reminds you of what you've always known. That you are more than thoughts, more than tasks, more than whatever the day has placed on your shoulders. You are breath, rhythm, spirit wrapped in softness, and tonight you rest like the ancients did, not by force, but by invitation. So let's build your temple now. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Let the air around you feel cooler, slower. Imagine the walls, smooth sandstone, warm to the touch, golden light flickering from braziers in the corners, the faint scent of honeyed incense rising like a slow spiral toward the ceiling. Your bed is low to the floor, soft linen, a cushion behind your head, the weight of calm already pressing gently over you like a blanket made of silence. And above you, a painted ceiling, stars, deep blue, endless, the sky inside stone. Somewhere in the temple, a priest chants, low, rhythmic. You don't understand the words, but they move something in you, like waves, like the heartbeat of the earth beneath you. You are not here to think. You are here to receive, to rest, to be still. Because healing doesn't come from effort, it comes from surrender. Let the day fall away now. Let the past have its peace. Let the future wait. Tonight, the gods speak in dreams, not with thunder, but with warmth. And you are safe to drift. Whatever lives in the Vatican vaults, whatever spells remain hidden in ink and linen, whatever names were once spoken under moonlight on Nile's shores, you carry them now, not as knowledge, but as rhythm, as quiet magic within the folds of breath and sleep. You have walked the temples, you have heard the whispers, you have felt the echo in your own stillness. And now, you are returning to the oldest ritual of all, not reading, not writing, just resting, just sleeping, as the ancients did, with faith, with calm, with a soul gently rocking on the river of dreams. Good night, dear listener. May your heart be light as the feather. May your breath be steady as the Nile, and may your sleep be filled with kindness and stars.